So thanks for riding along with us as we do that. Tolu Olunuripa from The Atlantic joining us. Arshi Siddiqui is a former aide to Speaker Pelosi and also a Democratic strategist, and Mark Bednar, the Republican strategist and former advisor to Speaker McCarthy. So thank you, one and all. Monica's still with us, so you already know her. Let's talk about some of the things the president has just said. Mark, let me start with you. When you hear the president speaking critically of allies at a time when he needs them, does that sit well with other Republicans?
Well, when he finishes the thought and it's comprehensive about it, it's a very important conversation. For instance, when he's been critical about the EU's involvement and their ask for help against Russia, they're buying record amounts of Russian natural gas. So they're personally funding Putin's war machine. So when he criticizes them, in totality, that argument then makes sense. And here, the EU is going to also benefit from a defanged Iran, a nuclear-free Iran. So the fact that they have actual major incentives as well to participate and to get on board and to help secure this area.
We certainly had more than a hint that Bill Clinton might be a phone friend of President Trump today. Are you surprised by that? Do you think it has benefit for the president to hear from others who've sat in that chair?
Absolutely. I think that's a positive aspect, and we know that the president likes picking up the phone. So I'm glad that circle is widening, and I hope it continues to widen in terms of getting different types of thoughts and perspectives.
Do you get a sense that when the president talks about, I thought the prices would go, or the stock market would go down more dramatically, do you think that's a message Democrats can seize on in the weeks ahead?
I think the stock market is one piece of the puzzle, but it all goes back to affordability. And certainly the stock market has a lot to do with retirement and balances there. But this uncertainty and volatility and the self-inflicted wounds on the economy, I think that's where Democrats are going to double down, because these are concerted decisions that the administration is making, whether on tariffs, whether or not extending the ACA subsidies, the enhanced subsidies on health care, cutting Medicaid, cutting food assistance. All of these things are raising prices for Americans. And then not to mention the big elephant in the room, gas prices.
Oh, yes. Everyone's talking about gas prices. Tolu, what stands out from you? We've heard from the president a couple of times today. In this most recent example, the vice president right over his shoulder. We know that he has often been a critic of this kind of activity. They were asked about that, seemed to put up a united front. What do you think the takeaway is from what the president's trying to say in this moment?
I think the president is trying to say that this is a short-term, in his word, excursion, something that's going to be over soon. And he even said that this is going to be finished soon. I think the president is trying to find an off-ramp here. War is very complex. It often does not go according to a script, but I think the president is realizing that this is something that does not have the level of popularity that he thought it would have, especially among his base, and he's trying to find an off-ramp, and he's saying that this will end soon, and not talking about wanting to blow up Iran's oil or do anything that would escalate this further. So I do think the president is trying to find some kind of off-ramp. He's already talking about this as a victory and trying to frame it in that way, and that's probably what we're going to see in the coming days.
Do you see any ongoing strains with other leaders? I mean, when the president talks about NATO or allies wouldn't be there for the United States, we know the only time that Article 5 was invoked was after 9/11. He doesn't reference that. And obviously, it's a tense time for those other nations. Do you see that as having long-term impact?
Well, for sure. The president has been sort of badgering our allies for quite a long time, and now he's trying to get the allies to help him in the Strait of Hormuz, and he's not getting the response that he thought. And he's saying that a lot of these allies are the ones that actually need the support or need the oil that's coming through the Strait of Hormuz. And I think the president is realizing that not having that strong relationship with allies, not being able to rely on them, not having them feel like they can rely on the U.S. is now becoming a hindrance as he moves forward with this war, and not having, the EU and NATO and other folks that he wants to be sending warships, not having them all on board. And I think that's part of what the president is doing.
And of course, a great cost is always the service members. And we've seen that with the loss of life for Americans and really untold numbers on the other side or in other countries. Monica, in the last day or so, the president's been asked about his response to the deaths of American service members. He's been asked about the use of an image of him at the dignified transfer when 6 Americans were returned home in an advertising or fundraising appeal, rather. He seems quite prickly about that. What is the impact there?
Yeah, he did not like that line of questioning from a reporter on Air Force One and sort of was dismissive of it overall. When the president has been asked about this, he has said things like you're always going to have death. When you start a war, that is part of the risk. That is sort of part of the calculation, and not perhaps responding with a level of empathy from a commander-in-chief that certainly his critics are calling for. He did attend that dignified transfer. He had indicated, and the White House had indicated, that he could be present for future of similar events, of those extremely solemn nature and moments. But he certainly doesn't always approach it in that manner of talking about just the incredible loss of life that we are seeing from American service members over there. But he was the one that warned about this at the very beginning. When that first announcement of these strikes came, he said this was likely going to result in American service members losing their life, and he seems to have just factored that into this. The longer it goes, acknowledging the more we could see.
Mark, would you counsel the PAC, the Political Action Committee, to not continue to use those images?
Well, from a tactical standpoint, he raises so much money anyway, he doesn't need to use images like that. He's a very good fundraiser. But in a more serious sense, he's actually very empathetic. Behind closed doors, he is very concerned. You know, he talks to Gold Star families all the time. He talks to veterans, their spouses, their families.
But was that a miss?
It was unneeded because he raises so much money anyway. It's going to be able to deploy in 26 and 28. We can raise money without images like that.
Okay. And Tolu, do you get a sense, we only have a few seconds left, that this resonates with members of Congress and military families and people who have maybe a closer reach to service members than in the big picture?
Well, for sure. This is unprecedented to see a president using this kind of imagery. And even people within the president's base are not happy about this war overall. So seeing this become even more politicized and used for fundraising is not something that is going to help the president over the long term.
We have an abbreviated panel today. I thank you for your time and your insights, and we thank you for watching with us as well.